Welcome to Vets to PM's Military Transition Academy podcast, the show where we discuss how to succeed in transitioning from the military service to the civilian workforce. This show and the academy it represents helps veterans transition into meaningful, lucrative post-service careers. Your primary host is Eric Doc Wright, PhD, certified manager, military veteran, serial founder, best-selling business author, philosopher, linguist, and coach. Your other host is Jeremy Burdick, project management professional, scrum master, product owner, and retired Air Force chief, and the current COO of Vets to PM and the Professional Development Unit University, where we will interview veterans successful in corporate America and business to bring you nuggets of wisdom every episode to make you more successful. Next, let's introduce today's guest. Our special guest today is Robert Wagner, retired first sergeant in the Army and a 19Z Cavalry Scout who served on active duty for 20 years. Currently, Robert serves as the Learning and Development Specialist for North America at Embraer, and I can't wait for you to get to know him, so let's get started. All right, today we got Robert Wagner on as a guest, and it's so nice to have you. Just tell us a little bit about, one, your military service, and then two, your transition, and then we'll go into where you are now.
All right, awesome. Yeah, so I appreciate the opportunity to come and join you today and kind of share my experience. Though it's limited on the transition side, I've only had about 9 months now, I guess, out of service. So I spent 20 years in the Army as a reconnaissance or a Cavalry Scout. And so just recently, obviously, retired in June. And so since that whole process, it's probably been 2 years in the making, I guess, in that world of transitioning, planning before and then during and then after. So that's kind of where I'm at today as far as what I've done. So 20 years on a whole host of different positions. I retired as a first sergeant. I turned down promotion in order to retire. But again, it was just a decision that we thought was best for our family at the time.
That's interesting. So, I mean, just the cool Cavalry Scout thing, enjoyed that, went on to kind of a first sergeant role, probably less in the field, more into the human resources slash taking care of health, morale, and welfare of the troops. But then what triggered you to say, hey, I'm going to turn down that promotion and it's time? Like what inside you said that was enough?
Yeah, I think for me, so I had been hearing kind of the rumblings of, your skills translate to the outside community. Like it's so desirable. Like companies are fighting for your type of personality and what you can bring to an organization. And I just really wanted the challenge. I felt like the military at itself, I loved it. I appreciate everything the military offered me as far as opportunities for growth and development. But I wanted to challenge myself. And, the question was, do I wait now? Do I go 3 years from now? Do I stay in to do 5 years to be, a sergeant major or, whatever? And I just kind of waited for a long time. And I just said, you know what, I really want to I want to grow. So I wanted to see if my skills actually translated into the civilian sector. I wanted to identify if I, could, I guess, be successful outside of the military. And so it was just really just kind of taking a leap of faith and saying, you know what, I think it's time. The Army is going to go on without me. So at the end of the day, it's time to start thinking about me and my family and what we're going to do next in that next chapter of life.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. It's obviously not extremely unique. That's what a lot of folks end up doing is they kind of get whatever tea leaf or signal that happens in their head or, external factors like, hey, I'm going to have to move. I'm going to have to uproot my family or my family wants to move on. We see a lot of that. But I like the fact that there was something that you said right in the beginning. It's part of a 2-year transition process. Tell me a little bit about that. You decided 2 years before the exit date, or you mean a year prior?
Yes. So I actually, so the uniqueness of my story is, so I actually was on assignment to go to Italy. I was going to take on another OCONUS assignment. So half of my career, I was outside of the country. And so I was going to go back to Europe and I started to kind of just that little seed of doubt of like, is this really where I want to be? And I was going to go back to an airborne assignment, do all these things as first sergeant, so on and so forth. But I ended up saying, you know what, if I'm going to transition and I don't know if I'm going to retire or not, I can't do that for Midley because that transition is already hard enough. So to do it outside the country would be even harder. And so I said, well, I'm going to keep myself stateside. So I called in some favors and asked some friends and, got my assignment changed. I ended up taking on the ROTC program in the Northeast. And so I took that on. I knew it was, again, still a competitive position that kept me in line if I stayed in. But so this was a year and a half or so before I, kind of, and so that summer I sat down and I kind of just listed it out, pros and cons. If I stay in, what am I gaining? What am I losing? If I get out, what's out there? What does the job market look like? Talk to everybody. I came across some great resources in Vetterelli, and just having conversations, that virtual coffee sessions, just I talked to, the vice president of talent at Microsoft to the general manager at BP, oil and gas, and, just having those conversations because people will genuinely give you 10 or 15 minutes just to bounce theories and thoughts and ideas. And so I took all that information and I tried to make a well-informed decision as to what that would look like. And then once I finally made the call for myself, I sat down with the family, we listed it all out. Then we just kind of started the planning process. And, I put together, there was so much, having been out of the work sector for 20 years, there was so much that, we were not exposed to in the military, resumes, interviews, all that other stuff. So I just started mapping out a plan, getting my hands on all the resources I could, and leveraging every relationship that I had built in the military for even those who had gotten out. I had friends that have just exited within the last 2 to 5 years, and I called them and said, "Hey, tell me about your transition. Tell me about your experience and your lessons learned." And I just try to leverage all that. And so ultimately, it just continuously kind of built out into a more elaborate plan. And I think probably in the last 3 months, right before I was scheduled to go on terminal leave, I had like this whole I don't want to call it a nervous breakdown, but I was just like I was panicking. I wasn't getting job interviews. I just I wasn't I didn't know if I was marketable, but I realized that networking mattered. I had to make, where I wanted to be and talk to people and get myself in those right circles to people that know my name versus just a piece of paper on a resume. And so that was kind of my transition up till I went on terminal leave.
Wow. Wow, that sounds like a pretty comprehensive plan, honestly. I mean, you started out talking to some industry experts, and I think that that's really, really unique and good. And you learn some stuff, and then you kind of made a plan, and then you get close to it, and it's like, oh no, it's not happening the way I wanted, right? And no plan survives first contact with the enemy, as we all know. So what are some of those lessons learned that you found out, either the easy way or the hard way, that'll help, active duty to civilian employment?
Yeah, so for me, let's see if I can try to summarize some of these, but I definitely had a lot of hard lessons, and there's nothing wrong with a bit of failure. I find growth in failure. But it was definitely expectation management was a big one. I think a lot of us, especially for the retiree side of the house, I know first term, you're only out of the market for, 3 to 5 to 6 years. And, it's not that big of a gap. But for those of us that spent decades out of the civilian market, expectation management was just like a new concept. We'd always had our value kind of validated while we were in service. And so to now get out and try to prove yourself and say, hey, I am value to the team and this is what I bring, but, speaking their language, understanding, we generally do the same things. We just got different terminology around it. So that was one. It was also in salary expectation. So the military has a great resource through DFAS where you can do your personal finance assessment. You can see how much you're making on an annual basis with all your benefits. And so I thought, in my kind of generic view or infant thought process is I thought, well, I got to make that same amount of money because I don't want to see a decline in my quality of life or whatever. And so, and I think I was probably making somewhere in the ballpark of around 115,000 a year. So I was like, all right, so that's what I'm looking for, a job that makes 115,000 a year. But in the civilian world, 115,000 a year is, most people are in those positions for a few years, and they've worked their way from, you can come in with a degree in the higher tiers of the close to 100,000, or you could get lucky and end up over 100,000. But again, I think those are few and far between. But when I started asking people, and the number one question I got asked, kind of going through my transition process, is, what do you want to do? That was the other thing that I really struggled with, because I didn't know. I had, I thought about project management. I thought about business partner. I thought about, I was very kind of uh, underdeveloped in the regard of like exploring these things. I had done tons of research and looking at jobs, but I hadn't really had a meaningful conversation with somebody that was in the roles that I was pursuing until the later part of my transition, where I started to say, okay, well, I know these jobs that I want to target now, and I got to start talking to people who are in those industries, watching YouTube and reading articles and doing all that stuff that gives you a perspective, but having conversations with people who are doing the jobs. As an example, I targeted a company, and I thought it was that's the skills bridge I wanted to do. That's what it was. I talked to a manager there, and they said, well, we're actually on a hiring freeze, and I'm actually leaving the company. And I said, interesting. But again, had I not talked to that person, I would have never known. I'd have walked into that job. Maybe I would have had the same experience. Maybe I would have had better, either, to each is their own on that. But at the end of the day, it was just having those conversations. But for me, I learned about expectation management and salaries in jobs. Some jobs you got to have a degree to get in there, or you got to have the certification. And then some jobs you can get in the front door, but you've got to lower your expectation on believing that you're going to walk in the door and make the same amount of money as your manager. And so that was one. And then the other lesson learned was planning, financial planning. That was a big lesson learned. I of course like to take the more scenic route in transition. So I moved my family across the country. We, everything that we had established where we were at in New Hampshire. And I said, I want to go to Florida because the benefits were obviously better in that side of the house. But I did not plan for the gap of 60 days for your pay to start, your benefits, all this other stuff. So that was another hard lesson learned for me. But I also, like I said, I think the biggest blessing for me was I got a career advocate, which I know has been on the show, Katie Garcia. But she was massive. She called me just out of the blue one day and said, hey, I think I've got a job that you line up for. Would you be interested? She gave me the particulars. I read about it. I researched it. It wasn't even a job I was targeting, like a role. And it was perfect for what I wanted it to get out and do. And it allowed me a lot of flexibility, and it was a pretty competitive role to get into. But at the end of the day, it was hugely beneficial and just the right job for me as I got out. That was a thing I struggled with in my transition was I kept hearing veterans tell me, just take any job you can get your hand, just get your foot in the door. Don't worry about it. It's not going to bring your dream job. Just take a job. And I struggled with that because I was like, I don't, statistically speaking, I looked at the stats and, veterans get out and the first 18 months, they change jobs like 3 times because they're trying to find their way. They're trying to figure out where they want to be and what type of environment they want to be around. And I said, I don't want to do that. I want to get out. I want to be in a job. Now, maybe this job is 20 years, maybe it's 5 years, either way, but I knew I was walking into a job that I wanted to be in versus a job I just had to accept. And so those were all kind of hard lessons I learned as I was getting up to transition.
Wow. Wow. Just to recap a little bit, do expectation management on salary, on the financial planning for that transition, because there's a gap. There's always just like in going from mountain range to mountain range, there's a valley in between, right?
Yeah.
And then you talked about moving, so logistics, right? So you could run into some issues there, but that kind of falls into the financial planning. But then also expectation management on the position that you're going to take. You
Hmm.
don't have to take the first thing that's thrown at you, but it's a lot easier, I guess. I understand why people give you that advice. It's like it's easier to make a good decision when you're not worried about where the next meal's coming from.
Hmm.
However, you got all that onboarding, and then guess what? You're stuck in a job, potentially for a year that you really don't want, depending on the contract that you sign or whatever else. So,
Yeah.
really good advice all the way around. I couldn't agree with you more. The gap analysis of, hey, pretend you don't get a paycheck for 60 days. What does that look like for you and your family? I mean, that's a really cool nugget of wisdom right there. And then the VA process and benefits, how did that, what did you encounter on that side that you could help somebody with?
Yeah, so with that one, I would always encourage, and I even now I talk to other veterans and I encourage them. Patience is the game when it comes to the VA. It is, I don't know if it's by design, but it is intended to challenge you on your patience level. But I don't think it's, and I get it, for whatever reason, it's bogged down. It takes months to hear answers back. Everything is, but we could point to 1,000 reasons of why it should be more efficient. But at the end of the day, I went through the VA system, so I had actual resource. I got lucky, and luck to me is preparation and opportunity meeting at the same pass, right? Um, but I had a resource. It was an old team leader of mine who got out, went to work for the VA, and I called them and I said, "Hey, I just want to bounce some ideas off it, and you give me some wisdom or knowledge going forward as I get ready to prepare it." And so I did before discharge disabilities. And so I did the BDD. I encourage every transitioning service member get into that pot because once you get into the other, millions of veterans, it's going to be way slower. BDD was definitely, I think within 30 days, I had my answers of me transitioning out. And that may not be applicable for everyone, but again, it's a pretty good benchmark. But so I called him and he said, "Hey, I've got a resource that's in another state. She's great on this side of the house. Let me put you in contact with her." So I reached out to her and she sent me something as simple as like an exoskeleton of a human being. And she said, "I want you to go head to toe. And I want you to list every single thing that you think is wrong with you. And then I want you to go toe to head and I want you to think about all the things that hurt for one day or bothered you one day." And she said, "Just remember that you're looking not how you feel today, but how you felt over the course of the last 20 years. And anything that seems abnormal, just list it and we'll go through it." And I said, "Okay." And so that's what I did. And then I logged into the VA portal. I, opened up the claims thing and she walked me step by step how to write it, what they're looking for, so on and so forth. And then I went from my 12 simple claims that I thought, by the time I was done with her, I was up to like 41.
Wow.
Uh, and she said, because it was things that I didn't think about, like I've got right knee, pain and it hurts. And she said, "You have left knee pain." And I said, "Well, it only hurts every once in a while." She's like, "Yeah, that's because that knee's compensating for the other knee." And I said, "Okay." So it was like bilateral knee pain. So now it went from one to two areas that had to be examined. She said, "Let them examine the challenges and let them determine that. That's their job. Your job is to list the things that are wrong with you." And I said, "Okay." And so I just kind of went through that process and I got very fortunate. Like I said, just, I had to be patient with it. I had to understand it was a process. And even now, I'm now what 9 months out of service and, I'm still trying to get them to update my dependents, so I've still got a supplemental claim pending, but I'm fine. I'm drawing my disability. Everything's good in that regard, and I'm just like, you know what? Just let it play itself out. And either way, the VA will make it up to you on the back end. They always back pay you. I haven't had a problem with their system, so they'll make things right. It's just going to take them a while to get there. So I would just encourage people when going through the VA claims process, patience is the game, and also just don't give up.
Yeah.
I've met veterans now being in this company. There's so many veterans here. And one of the veterans said, "Hey, I'm at 30%." And I said, "Is that where you think you should be?" And then he's like, "Well, no, but that's what I got when I got out. And I didn't feel like fighting it." I said, "Then go back." I said, "But you're costing yourself not only benefits, once you cross those thresholds of opening up doors to other benefits, but you're also costing, the benefits for your family. they may benefit off of this. And so if I understand it's a long fight, but anything good is worth fighting for.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, good words. I like that. I mean, and ultimately, persistence is the game, right? I like that.
mhm,
Patience, persistence, and then, a little bit of tenacity, ultimately not, is kind of what I sum up what you just said. But ultimately, yeah, I really agree with the whole head to toe and then toe to head idea. And then not being the macho person that you were in the service and realize, hey, I didn't go to the doc because I didn't want to let my unit down.
mhm.
Um, it does hurt, but I can get through it. I'm hurt but not injured kind of theory. Where it's gonna hurt when you turn 55, trust me, and it's gonna hurt worse when you turn 65. And then by the time you're 75, if you're so lucky, now you need care, and that's what
Mhm.
you're really setting up. Even a zero rating is a rating, and it can
Yeah.
get care. So
And like I said, I had plenty of zero ratings. I had a couple deferreds, and I was totally fine with it. It was their medical assessments, their professionals to figure it out. But I also, one of the doctors I went and saw for the VA, he said, I don't want you to tell me what it's like today. I want you to tell me on its worst day what it's like. And I
yeah,
said, okay, got it. And so, he was like, how is your pain level? He's kind of going through this. And I said, it's, today would have been a 2. Now, on my worst day, it's a 7.
yeah,
Stuff like that. So again, and those matter. And so just meeting people along the way, asking the questions, being persistent with the VA. I called the VA once a month the whole time I was waiting. I knew they weren't going to have an answer, but I just wanted to keep my name. I wanted to keep the fact that, hey, this sponsor is calling. And again, I think it was actually 7 days from my official retirement date, I got my first decision letter from the VA.
that's really amazing. So that's a really good news story, especially if you do your ratings ahead of time and you can get on the lead side of it. I wouldn't say fortunate enough, but I happened to get med boarded during I had 21 years at the time, so it was still a regular retirement, but because of a med board, you can't separate or retire until you get your
Both
rate.
ben- yeah.
So that
And
was
so, and that's the thing that talking to veterans now, most of them were such a fast exit. They were just, hey, I'm done. I'm ready to get out. And I say, okay, but you're leaving all these benefits in the wake of which, and there's just the thing that I have learned after I transitioned is there's a plethora of benefits out there. There are so many, and people say, oh, well, I don't really need that. And I said, you may not need it, but maybe your kids need it. Maybe your wife, or significant other benefits off of it. But at the end of the day, it's also just you don't know you need it now, but when you do need it, it's better to have than to want.
yeah.
Uh,
And think of all the paperwork, right? You've got all those military records at your disposal very easily while you're still in. Wait 10 years, like the individual you're talking about, 30%. And hey, if you want to go back, it's a lot harder to go get those records. It's a lot more legwork. It's easier up front than down the road. So I agree 100%.
yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about where you're at now and the company that you're in and the position that you're in and how your military experience translated into the role you're serving today.
Yes, so I'm blessed in that regard. So I am currently the organizational learning and development specialist at Embraer, which is an aircraft manufacturer here on the Space Coast. But it was the best transition role especially for a non-commissioned officer. I mean, our whole lives exist around training and development. So the structure, I just gone through some advanced training at the University of Western Kentucky on the adult learning experience and kind of what that entails. I'd got some, undergraduate certs from them, kind of through that process. And that translated into this role. I'm focused on skill development. So I'm teaching people about leadership. I'm teaching people about effective communication. The list kind of goes on, and part of the thing this year as I get close to closing out this year is now I'm writing a whole strategy for 2024. And most of the colleagues that I'm talking to, they're like, wow, this is like super in depth, and it's like laid out. I said, well, I know what leaders want. They want predictability. They don't want me to call them and say, "Hey, I'm hosting an event, this month. Can you stop everything you're doing and show up for, an hour or 3 hours or whatever it is?" I'm going to lay it all out for them for an entire year and say, "You come to me and I'll be there when you need me." But I'm trying to list out and, all of I'm identifying organizational gaps. I'm helping leaders to understand where we are as an organization. But again, it was just the best role for me to walk into. A lot of flexibility and taking and leveraging my experience in the military and just again changing the terminology and realizing it's all the exact same problem sets, same kind of desired outcomes, maybe a different business model because I definitely don't know how to manufacture planes. I know how to jump out of them, but I don't know how to build them. But yeah, so now just teaching them things that I picked up over the last 20 years, I think has been hugely beneficial.
Yeah. Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. And in fact, I loved how general you kind of kept it was instruction, right? There's not one NCO in the world that has not had to instruct somebody on something, right? So you can lean on that. Communication. I mean, it's what you do 90% of the time in the military. You're communicating. And then finally, you're talking about using some of your educational stuff, and that helped you roll in. So don't overlook getting your education while you're in service
Yeah.
today. And I'll just to hammer it home, that the one that sends it out of the ballpark for me is the long range planning, right? Setting the plans in place to be predictable for leaders is crucially important in both the military. It doesn't mean you're going to stick with the plan. It just means
Hmm.
have a plan to break the plan. But if you just go willy-nilly, that's uncomfortable and gooey for everybody. Like everybody involved doesn't like that, to include the people who are getting the instruction, the people who are paying for the instruction, and the people that you want to guest speak at the instruction. So, well said. I mean, that was really
And I
the
would I would add on the educational piece. So one of the lessons too for me was education. I feared higher academia for a long time. And towards the tail end of my career, I finally jumped on the bandwagon, started going to college courses. I mean, by all accounts, I was no rock star when I joined the military. I didn't graduate high school. I dropped out. I got a GED, and that's part of the reason why I'm so thankful to the military. It just gave me an opportunity to do something. And, I was destined for blue collar, nothing wrong with, laborious work. But that's where I was headed, no matter what I was going to do. But the military gave me an opportunity, and then obviously we get the benefit of education. I went through there, and I was working full time, going to school, just like every other veteran who takes on school. But and I just completed an undergraduate with a 4.0 GPA. And I tell people it wasn't because I was the smartest person in that class. I just outworked everybody. I was willing to put in an extra hour on a paper, or I was willing to, spend another half hour studying for an exam, whatever it was. And then now I'm now, pursuant to going after an MBA. And I've just talked to my wife about project management, and, getting her progressing forward. And so we're just continuously trying to grow and evolve and learn every single step of the way. I think that's another thing for me was, you never stop learning, you never stop growing. Because the
agreed.
moment you get complacent, then you'll end up getting stuck.
Yeah, yeah. Retirement is to expirement, you know. So
Yeah,
I've always heard that, but I know a good project management company. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
We weasel that in there for a little plug, but that's really cool. I think that I agree with you 100%. I mean, it's really definitely in the academia of higher education. It is not intelligence, it's perseverance, it's
Mm,
work ethic. It is setting aside time for things that matter. You know, you always find time for the things that matter to you, whether it's watching TV, going out to eat, playing sports, or higher education. It's what you make time for, you'll find time for. So I think that's wildly important to emphasize. You're not too dumb. If you're listening out to this out in MTA Nation, you are not too dumb to start school tomorrow. You know, it's just,
nope. In
yeah,
no way, shape, or form.
yeah, too cool. All right. So as we wrap this up, I want to make sure I give you an opportunity to, top tips and tricks that you might give for a tactical advantage on the military transition that we didn't talk about. And then secondly, if you've got anything like a book or anything that you helped as a resource that you could say, hey, if you read this or you watch this video or you do this, it's going to be helpful tomorrow.
Yeah, so top tips and tricks. One, leverage as many relationships and I guess a set of eyes when it comes to resume development. Um, it's everybody's got an opinion on what a resume should or could look like, but at the end of the day, you truly do have to tailor your resume to every position you apply for. Because you want to put your best foot forward because that's your first impression and first impressions matter. The other thing is, again, leveraging past relationships, current relationships, future relationships. Talk to as many people as humanly possible. I think I was pleasantly surprised by the amount of people who are willing to give you 10 or 15 minutes of their time. And I mean, everything from, early entry level managers all the way up to very top senior executives I talk to. And of course, they have their own different viewpoints and perspectives. But again, that wealth of knowledge and just perspective is uncanny, especially as you get into some of these hiring process interviews and you have the ability to think both at the organizational level, strategic level, and at the direct operational levels. And so being able to articulate that, being, on your feet, I guess, so to speak. As far as like literature to read, I don't have any real big like game changing books out there that I took hold in. I would say The 1 Minute Manager and the Monkey was a profound book to me. Just taught me about taking on too much and passing. Often as a leader, we start taking on the task of our employees. But it was a short read. It was like 97 pages, and it was like I summarized the last 7 years of my leadership experience into 97 pages because I remember saying, hey, I'm going to help you out. Don't worry about it. And then I would have that same subordinate come back to me and say, hey, first sergeant, you done with that? And I'm like, it's your task. I'm trying to help you out. But it was a great resource. So it helped me kind of think about task prioritization and how I was going to look at it and how to ban it. And then planning. I can't express, how important planning is. Plan for every possible contingency you can think of. Just don't become emotionally invested when things don't go the way you want them to go. It's fine. Everything happens for a reason. There's a resource out there. If you don't have one, call me. I'll help you out in any way, shape, or form. And then obviously lend a helping hand to any veteran you can be in and around. It is a community of people from every branch of service. I've met some amazing human beings that I obviously never interacted with, but we served generally around the same time zone, spaces. We're just either a few blocks away or a few hundred miles away. But at the end of the day, help each other out, and then, yeah, focus on having a good transition and don't look back. Just keep looking forward, and eventually you'll get to where you want to go.
Yeah, burn the boats. I like it.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's such very cool. And I usually don't do a whole lot of follow-up questions after that one, but
yeah,
let me
no worries.
there's one thing I want to, I mean, when you called these executives or, even senior managers or even junior managers, did you have like a list of questions or like standard questions you wanted to ask them so that one, you asked them all the same and you got different perspectives, or two, you just wanted it to be supernatural?
So I did have some templated questions that were not all the same. They were very tailored to the person, their position, their role, or where I researched their role and responsibility. Some of it was clarifying questions. I will say one of the better resources too that I forgot to mention, and I can't believe I did, but I utilized a resource, and basically they taught me about utilizing LinkedIn as a strategic approach to everything. LinkedIn Learning is a great tool. It shouldn't be misutilized because obviously it'll lose its luster and its platform. But I started to just use the search bar, identify people in that organization, identify people who either I had a link through veterans because I knew they had a family member or they help with nonprofit veteran organizations, whatever that looked like. I also leveraged states that I'd lived in or been a part of or anything that could connect us. And I just sent them a very basic message. And I just said, hey, I'd love 5 to 15 minutes of your time, just a general conversation about your role and responsibility, about your journey into getting to where you are, especially those senior level managers or executives. And most of them, I would say 80% of them, gave me a response and said, "Hey, love to meet with you. Let's put something on the schedule and let's make it happen." The ones that couldn't either just were time consumed, their schedules were too crazy, and they said, "Hey, but anything I can do for you later on, hit me up in 3 to 5 months and and some of them I absolutely followed up with. But I started using LinkedIn as a strategic approach to talking to them. But I did pre-template some questions for them just to kind of drive the conversation to make sure that I respected their time that they allocated and invested in me. So I wanted to make sure that I asked questions because I had a goal. I wanted to understand what the job entailed, what was the expectation from the hiring manager perspective. I wanted to understand what was the impact on the organization, what were the growth opportunities out there, what could I expect in salary as you kind of in entry level to senior level roles, and then anything and everything they were willing to share along the way. So I often just asked them if there was one piece of advice you could offer to anybody who was going to, vibe for your job one day, what would you tell them? And that was normally how I kind of closed out those conversations. And again, it was hugely beneficial. I mean, I've got a whole notebook of just random notes of just people I've talked to all over the country, everywhere in any way, shape, or form. And they weren't in the industries that I targeted. They were literally all over the spectrum. So I didn't have a very singular approach. I also I stayed away from the Department of Defense intentionally. I knew it was an easy win for me. I could go to the Department of Defense. It was, like-minded people, government contracting, mostly veterans, but I wanted to see, could I do it outside of what the Department of Defense offered? And so I purposely did that, and I purposely targeted people outside of that because I wanted to see the perspective of others.
Oh, too cool. Like challenge accepted.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so, like I said, I was blessed. It worked out for me. And I think anybody's capable. It's just time, energy, effort.
Yeah, I like it. As we wrap this up, you maybe offered up for people to contact you. What's the best way to contact you?
Yeah, so reach out to me through my personal Gmail, which is robert.a.wagner00 at Gmail. Um, the let's see, my phone number 352-870-2831. And I'm located in Florida. So, and I'm also, like I said, I got a computer, so I'll have virtual coffee with anybody. I'll share same advice or more advice if they've got pointy questions. I probably got some other lessons learned that I didn't get out today, but at the end of the day, like I said, if I can affect one veteran a day, it's a win for everyone. So,
yeah, amen, amen. I like it. Thank you for tuning in and spending a bit of time with us at the Military Transition Academy powered by Vets to PM. If we piqued your interest, but you want more details, please head over to the website vets2pm.com and see if we can help prepare you for a better tomorrow or a future meaningful and lucrative career.